Digital rights management, or DRM, is the use of technology to control and manage access to copyrighted material. This practice is put in place by corporations and individual authors to prevent customers from engaging in piracy and unauthorized distribution, therefore guaranteeing that the owner of the copyrighted material receives the appropriate compensation for the created digital work, as well as protecting intellectual property. While copyright laws already exist to address fair use and distribution, DRM goes a step further to take control of the user's access to the digital content. The main technologies used to enforce this include restricting users from saving or editing screen recordings of the content, setting expiry dates on media, limiting media access to specific devices and locations, and implementing watermarked graphics and metadata to protect the content. Examples of this technology are everywhere. Streaming platforms like Netflix or Disney Plus use DRM to limit your access to movies and shows as long as you have an active subscription, and restrict the number of devices linked to the account. Adobe Creative Cloud requires you to be online to verify your license in order to access programs like Photoshop, and Denuvo Anti-Tamper, which verifies video games copies are legitimate in real time and attempts to stop cracking. The ethical side for DRM. Musicians, developers, and filmmakers invest time and effort into their products. Without some form of protection, that work can get copied and distributed, and the creator sees nothing from it, and the incentive to keep creating can fade. In this case, DRM is the digital lock on the door. It ensures that the people who made something can actually earn from it, and later put these earnings into creating more digital content. Also, it secures the media's ownership, preventing others from altering and rebranding it as their work. Following this approach is ethically defensible and reasonable. However, in practice, it also creates an illusion of ownership. The enforcement of this practice comes as a product of media digitalization and corporations' intent to maximize profit. In the past, going to GameStop and buying a physical copy of a game meant that you owned that copy. You could play the game, lend it, resell it, or just keep it on your shelf for 20 years. Now, when you buy the same game digitally for the same price, instead of owning the game, you own a permission to use it that can now be revoked at any time. When a customer accesses a digital store and sees a game they want, with a price tag and content, and clicks a purchase button, the customer assumes that purchase means what it has always meant. Now, in reality, what they actually purchased is a license, declared into an extensively long terms of service agreement that nobody reads, and companies know that. So, corporations use this lock on the door to protect content and also trap the customer, and the ethical justification starts to collapse. Let's set an example. Tyler loves racing video games, and he particularly enjoys making the perfect car build to beat others online. So he bought Ubisoft's game The Crew, and he invested thousands of hours into it. He loved it and he played it every day, but Ubisoft, barely 10 years after its launch, decided to shut down the servers and make the game inaccessible, despite having an offline mode. Now, Tyler's copy becomes permanently unplayable, and Ubisoft did not offer him a direct process to receive a refund. He did not pirate anything, he didn't violate the terms of service, but one day he could not access the video game that he purchased and played for thousands of hours. The point here is not whether Ubisoft had business reasons. Maybe the servers were expensive, maybe licenses expired, or maybe the game was no longer profitable. The ethical question is whether it is right to sell something under the language and appearance of ownership while quietly reserving the power to destroy access later. To test that action, I will use three ethical standards: John Locke's theory of property, John Rawls' theory of justice as fairness, and Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative. First, Locke. Locke's theory of property argues that people gain a claim to property when they mix their labor with it. In a basic sense, if someone works to create something, they have a right to benefit from that work. This supports DRM on the creator side. If a developer spends years making a game or an artist makes an album, their labor should not be stolen through piracy. But Locke also creates a problem for corporations. The customer also adds labor and a financial investment into the video game. In a game like The Crew, Tyler is actively investing time, making progress, and developing skill. He creates personal value inside the product. So while Ubisoft created the game, Tyler's effort makes the game have a greater personal value thanks to his personal experience with it. Under lock, Ubisoft has a legitimate property claim over the original game, but the customer also has a legitimate expectation that the purchased copy, or at least some playable version of it, will not simply disappear one day. DRM becomes unethical when it completely erases the value created by paying users. Second, Rawls. Rawls asks us to imagine society from behind a veil of ignorance. That means we design rules without knowing what end of the spectrum we will be on. Either the corporation, the developer, the artist, the rich consumer, or the person who saved money for months to buy one game. Behind that veil, would we choose a system where companies can advertise digital products with the language of purchase, but customers can lose access whenever the company arbitrarily decides the product should not be live anymore? I believe DRM fails this ethical test. A fair system would protect creators and consumers at the same time. It would allow companies to prevent piracy, but it would also require clearer disclosures and better plans of action. If a digital product is temporary, say it clearly and adjust its value. Do not hide it in a 30-page legal agreement. If a game depends on servers, explain what happens when those servers shut down, and if possible, provide an offline mode or at least a refund. Under Rawls, the current model is unfair because a corporation has almost all the power. The customer carries the risk, but the company controls the terms, the servers, the license, and the shutdown date. Justice as fairness would demand a better balance. Third, Kant. Kant's categorical imperative says we should treat people as ends in themselves and not merely as means to an end. In other words, people should not be manipulated or used only for profit. They deserve honesty, respect, and rational consent. This is where DRM becomes most ethically dangerous. If a company knows that customers interpret purchase as ownership, but the company also knows that the real agreement is only a revocable license, then the transaction becomes morally questionable. The customer is not being treated as a fully informed, rational person and instead as a source of revenue while the real conditions are buried in legal language. Kant would ask, could we universalize this behavior? Could every company sell digital goods as purchases, hide the limits in fine print, and then revoke access whenever convenient? If every company did that, trust in digital markets would collapse. People would stop believing the word buy, and it would no longer mean anything permanent. So, under Kant's test, this practice fails. Now, the verdict. DRM is not automatically unethical. Protecting artists, developers, and filmmakers is fair, but selling customers the feeling of ownership while legally giving them only temporary permission is not fair. The ethical solution is not to abolish DRM completely, but to enforce transparency and preservation. Companies should clearly label whether customers are buying ownership or temporary access. They should also explain server dependence and the risks, as well as creating end-of-life plans for digital products. And when a product can no longer be supported online, companies should make a reasonable effort to preserve at least some usable version for people who actually paid. So my final position is this. DRM may have been intended as protection, but its deceptive, over-controlling, and dismissive nature makes it an unethical practice as it stands. The digital lock is acceptable when it keeps thieves out, but it becomes unacceptable when it locks the rightful customers out too. In the end, the issue is about what ownership really means in a digital society. If buying something no longer means you can keep it, then companies should stop pretending it does.